Hello and welcome to my Lightroom black and white editing tutorial. Today I'm going to take this raw file and I'm going to turn it into a dramatic black and white picture like this while explaining to you every single step I do from start to finish. So first thing, obviously putting the picture from color into black and white, and as you can see the picture is a little bit crooked, so I'm just gonna go into the crop tool and I want to make sure that everything is nice and straight in this picture, and that definitely looks a lot better. And then as you can see the sky is relatively bright, so I'm just gonna go ahead and bring down the highlights by 100, and you see there's suddenly a lot of detail in the clouds and I really love that look. And now to my trick on how to create a very dramatic black and white look. So first thing, you want to start off by just bringing up the shadows 100. It looks way washed out, it doesn't look contrasty at all, but the reason I'm bringing up the shadows by 100 is so I can bring the blacks down as much as possible. So by bringing down the blacks you really get the very unique sort of contrast. It really makes the dark parts even darker. It's completely different to the contrast slider itself, and I really like that look. And I mean, here is before shadow and black adjustments and here would be after. Already a totally different image. It's very contrasty, but you have a lot of shadow detail as well. So just to show you why bringing up the shadows is so important, if I bring down the shadows to 0, the default, you can see everything is completely black. So it's very important that you raise the shadow for this particular method of editing black and white pictures. So that already looks pretty good. Then let's go to the contrast slider, and here you really just want to play around with that and just stick with whatever looks best. I mean, there's really no set tactic. You can even go into minus. I actually do this quite a lot of the times, but for this photo I think around, well, just a little bit into the plus works the best. Overall exposure really is fine, I think, and clarity. Now clarity, you don't want to over clarity your image. You might like this look, but it's almost a little bit too much for my taste. So if you go to clarity, once again here, don't be shy to go into the minus clarity if it works for your picture. However, for this particular black and white style, I usually go into the plus clarity, but once again, don't go too far. I'm just gonna go a little bit into the plus so we have a nice starting base. I can always grab an adjustment brush or radial filter later and add some local clarity on certain parts. I really like local adjustments rather than just making everything super over edited when I really just want some very heavy clarity in some very particular areas. So I'm gonna bring that down to around plus 18 for this photo. And actually the whites, I usually bring up the whites and hold down the Alt key to make sure that there is nothing clipped. Everything that is black is not clipped, and if it starts to get white, that means the part of the image is clipped. So you just want to make sure that you don't clip anything and just release the slider before you clip anything. And by the way, if you press down the Alt key with the blacks, you will also see a mask. Everything that is white here will not be clipped in the blacks, so completely different. And everything that is black means that the blacks are clipped, which means that there is no information, no detail in these parts of black. But with the blacks, I really don't mind it. It really can even help to kind of simplify the whole picture. So you really just want to make sure that you don't clip any whites, but clipped blacks is absolutely fine. So I'm done with the basics adjustments and the tonal curve. Tonal curve, you really just want to play around with that. I usually like to bring up the highlights here, but you want to make sure that if you do that, you go back to whites and you bring them down to make sure that you at the end don't have anything clipped. And the rest, I just like to play around with the rest. I kind of like this look. I usually really don't change these sliders too much down here, and there's also no set rule, you know, just go minus plus, and at the end go with whatever you like best. So I think I'm gonna bring up the shadows here a little bit. By the way, shadows in the tonal curve and in shadows in the basics adjustments are completely different. Shadows up here in the basics really just change the overall darkish part of your picture, so a very general adjustment, whereas the shadows down here in the tonal curve really just change the very dark parts of your picture. So I think I'm gonna go a little bit plus here, and actually there is a last thing down here, which is point curve. Here you could change a very fine and very detailed version of contrast. It might be worth to play around with. I sometimes add that in my pictures, especially black and white pictures, so I would suggest you just to play around with that and just see the different settings, and at the end just stick with whatever you like best. I'm not quite sure if I like linear or medium a little bit better, but I think I'm gonna leave it with, actually I think I like medium contrast better, so I'm just gonna stick there. Here's before the tonal curve, here's after, just a little bit more interest, a little bit more dynamic for the entire picture, and I really like that look. HSL tool is nothing we have to worry about in black and white. Split toning is kind of the same thing, even though in the black and white pictures you could still add some color, for example in the highlights. And I mean, this is a tool that I rather use very rarely for my black and white pictures. In my color pictures I use it quite a lot, but for my black and white pictures I really don't add color very often. But there are certain instances where I like to do it. But for this photo I really don't think it works, so I'm just gonna reset everything here and go down to detail. Detail is very important that you zoom in 1:1 so you actually see what you do. First thing I'm always doing here is go to sharpening and add some sharpening. I really like to add sharpening. I mean, I shot this with a Canon 600D and an 18-55 kit lens, which is a very inexpensive and kind of not super sharp lens. However, even if you have very expensive and very good glass, I still think that adding some sharpening really can make your picture look even better, and you will definitely notice the difference if you print your picture. So I'm just gonna add a little bit. Just be sure to not over sharpen the image, otherwise you will take away any of the natural look. But around 40, 50, 60 maybe even works pretty well in a lot of the cases. So I think I'm gonna stick with around 50 here. And masking slider, let's zoom out for that. Hold down the Alt key and bring the masking slider to the right. Everything that is white is now going to be sharpened, and everything that's black is not going to be sharpened. Reason why you want to bring the sharpening mask to the right is so you don't sharpen too much of the non-textured surfaces, such as the sky, for example water, or for example these rails. You know, if you add sharpening here, you will just introduce noise and you won't really sharpen any texture, because of course there are not any textures to sharpen. So maybe a little bit complicated, but just bring that to the right until most of your sky, your water is not selected. I usually go with around 60 to 80, really not very much below or above, but that looks pretty good here. So noise reduction is the next tool, and I really don't like noise reduction. If you've seen any of my previous videos, I surely know that you've heard that a lot of times, but in case this is your first video, I really don't like noise reduction because it takes away so much of the detail of your picture, and it makes it look so much more plasticky, and it really takes away a lot of the character as well as the detail, sharpness and everything. And especially in black and white pictures, I really think the cap, the threshold for noise is much higher at least for me, than it is with color pictures, because sometimes noise can even add to the character of the picture if you're editing a black and white picture. So noise reduction really would not change anything there, unless you have a super noisy picture. Then that is something you might have to compromise. But for a picture like this, even though there is a little bit of noise, there's really nothing like that needed. So detail tool would be done right here, because the color slider really is nothing we have to worry about in black and white pictures. I really love this slider in color pictures, but black and white you won't see the difference anyways. So let's just go down to lens corrections and do the only thing that I usually do here with my black and white pictures, which is enable profile corrections, and then just choose my lens. And this will get rid of the distortion as well as the vignetting of your picture. Now, distortion removing is definitely a very nice thing, but sometimes I really find that removing the vignetting doesn't look very good. So I sometimes even bring down the vignetting to 0. The main part of this tool right here is definitely to remove distortion, and it definitely is a very nice thing to have that. But with vignetting you can bring that down to 0 or just leave it, definitely up to you and what you think looks better at the end. So I'm gonna bring that down to 0 here, because I really think a little bit of vignetting works really well. And speaking of vignetting, let's go down here to the effects tools, and here you can add additional vignetting. Definitely do not go into the plus. I mean, plus vignetting really looks terrible. I never found a use for it. But if you want to add vignetting, then definitely go into the minus, and that can oftentimes help to give more attention towards the center of your picture and really lead your viewer's eye into the picture and contain it there. So in this case, let's just see a few different settings of vignetting. I think I'm going to add a little bit of vignetting. By the way, this is just global vignetting, which means it adds vignetting in every color very evenly. So if I do an extreme example here, sometimes I just add a little bit of vignetting here, but I add some more vignetting with the locals adjustments. For example, if I don't want the sky to have too much vignetting, but I just want the bottom part of the image to have a lot of vignetting. So that's also something I'm gonna do here in this photo to show you a little bit later. But for now, let's just choose a nice value of vignetting, and around -10 I think works really well. Now the other sliders down here, midpoint is pretty much the only thing that I play around with. Sometimes what this does is pretty self-explanatory. You can bring the midpoint of the vignetting. Once again, let's bring the amount to -100 so you really see the difference. Here you can just fine-tune how much vignetting you want in your picture and how much it is in your corners. So I mean, it's not a big thing, you can just leave that at 0, but sometimes I like to bring it a little bit more towards the center just to give even more vignetting in the entire picture. Then these other sliders, I mean, they really have such a little impact to your picture that I really don't even mess with those. It's really not even worth your time, at least in my opinion. And actually grain makes your picture look terrible. I really would not suggest you to add grain unless in a very rare occasion, if you're going for like an antique look or you want to simulate a very heavy film grain or something like that. But personally, I've never found a use for that tool in my pictures. So we're almost done with the global adjustments. A quick thing that I wanted to tell you is that down here at the camera calibration, even though this is a black and white picture, you can still play around with the primary colors and it will change the look very slightly. You can also play around with these profiles, but I really don't think that has very much of an impact in a black and white picture. In color pictures, that's definitely something I like, especially the profile, but for black and white pictures I usually just leave that out just to save some time, and the difference really isn't that big. But of course, if you're interested in that and what it does, and you can see it for yourself, you can of course play around with it. But I am done here with the global adjustments, so now is the fun part, which is the local adjustments. And these are really the tools where you can fine-tune your picture and really make it truly unique and truly interesting. So first thing I'm going to do here is grab a graduated filter and drag it over the sky. If you do a general adjustment, I would suggest you to kind of make this gradient, this feather, kind of soft. Don't make it super harsh, otherwise your adjustments will look kind of unnatural at the edge. So just go around, maybe something like this, and it should look pretty good. So I'm gonna reset everything here for now, and actually I want to make this guy really look even stormier than what I've been able to achieve with my global adjustments. So the way I'm doing that is just by bringing down the exposure, and we already have a kind of darker mood, and I really like that. But you can also make a sky even more dramatic by just bringing up the contrast. You really don't want to do it too much, these adjustments. Just see what it does and then go with a value that looks good to you but still has a sense of natural look. And also a thing that I usually do is just raise the clarity here by a little bit. But with raising clarity for the sky, you want to make sure that you don't do it too much, otherwise you may end up with a halo on high contrast edges. I don't think it's a problem for this picture, but it can be if you're really editing your picture very harshly, and I definitely run into that from time to time. So just go with whatever value looks good while not giving you any halos. So I think around plus 35 works pretty well. So we already have generally a very dramatic sky, and it definitely looks better than before. Let's just see the before and after. Here's before the graduated filter, and here's after. So I definitely like this look, and I think it fits the whole picture a lot better. Speaking of graduated filters, I'm gonna click here on new and grab another graduated filter, reset everything, and just grab another one just for the very top of this photo. So this is a thing that I'll do a lot of times to kind of close out the picture, and then I'm gonna bring down the exposure so that way your eyes really stay within the pictures and the attention goes more towards the center rather than to these edge portions of your picture. So I'm gonna bring down the exposure here quite a bit actually. Also want to make sure that you kind of keep it looking sort of natural, so you don't want to go with something like this. And I think that looks pretty good. Let's just see here before this graduated filter, and here's after. Just gives a little bit more sense of even more dramatic, and once again containing your eye within the picture. So graduated filters are really a thing that I love to add, and I'm not done yet. In fact, I'm gonna add another one to the right, and this way I'm gonna add a little bit more vignetting, but it's different to the vignetting tool that you have down here in the effects module. It really, you can customize it a little bit more. So as you can see, I kind of want it a little bit tilted, so I want more vignetting in the bottom portion, but once it goes to the sky, I kind of want it to go a little bit away. So I'm gonna have a filter like this just for the right portion, and I'm gonna bring down the exposure so that way you really get let into the picture, and I really like that look. And I'm gonna do the same thing with the left portion, also kind of angle it slightly and bring down the exposure here as well. And I think the last graduated filter that I'm gonna do here is just drag one over the very bottom portion of this picture and just bring down the exposure for the very bottom portion here as well to once again close out the picture. So let's see what the picture looks like without any graduated filters. And here's after. It really looks way more dramatic. It really gives your eye more of a center and more of a leading line into the picture. So once again, before any graduated filters, and here is after. Keep in mind that if you find these adjustments to be a little bit too much and that the image at the end looks a little bit too edited, you can of course always cut down on the edits and just go like half the way I have done. But you know, the overall kind of darkish and very dramatic look will of course stay the same. It's just up to you how far you want to go with it. So actually a thing that I've noticed is that the blacks are almost a little bit too dark. Sometimes once I am done with all of my adjustments, I go back to the basics adjustment and just see if there's any slider that I may have done a little bit too much. So I think here I've added a little bit too much blacks. At the time it was perfectly fine, I liked the look, but after adding so many other adjustments, you really can sometimes end up with a little bit too much edit. So anyways, I'm going to bring up the blacks here just a little bit, and I like this look a little bit better. So here is how we had it at the start, and here's how I like it afterwards. Same thing applies, for example, with clarity. You can definitely change that according to your liking. And actually I think I may have done a little bit too much, added a little bit too much clarity as well. So I'm gonna bring that down to +10 from +18. So it's really just two quick adjustments. Let's quickly see here. Here is before those adjustments back at the basics adjustments, and here's after, and I kind of like this look a little bit better. So for the most part I am actually done for this picture. I'm really happy with how it looks. However, I'm going to add some dodge and burning. Dodge and burning is making the individual parts of your image darker or brighter, and you can either use the adjustment brush or the radial filter for that. I kinda like the radial filter better in a lot of the cases, so that's just what I'm gonna choose here. Make sure that the feather is at 100 and that you of course invert the mask so all of your adjustments will just show within the actual filter. Then I often just bring some ellipse shapes, radial filters of all sizes on the picture and increase or decrease the exposure. I'm just gonna show you an example with first of all burning, which is making individual parts brighter. You can also mix these, by the way, with for example clarity. So let's just do that here. And the point of dodge and burning is to make the whole lighting in your whole scene a little bit more interesting. So I would just suggest you to drag around these filters. You can of course resize them and just see if you like the look of it. I think I'm gonna make a pretty big one here for this net. I really like this look. Then I'm gonna right click duplicate and maybe a little bit of a smaller one over here. This is really something that kind of takes you some time if you do it for the first time, but once you've done it for like 100 pictures, you kind of start to know which one will look good and at what place it will look good. So I'm actually not gonna skip that step. I'm actually gonna do everything here within the tutorial, just because I want to give you the very raw form without any skipping from the very raw file to the finished picture. But I'm kind of gonna do a little bit faster here, maybe a smaller one over there. And by the way, the filter, by bringing the feather to 100, let me just show you with a very dramatic example, or rather with the plus exposure. You can see it's just the kind of the center that really gets affected by your adjustments. You know, the filter really looks bigger than what the actual adjustment does to the photo. So keep that in mind, and I think we have a really nice plus exposure filters here in this photo. Maybe one more over here, And yeah, so now we're done with the plus exposure. Now I'm gonna add minus exposure, and minus exposure, I generally tend to not use it as much. However, in black and white pictures, especially dramatic black and white pictures like this, I really like to bring down the exposure and add quite a lot of dodging filters. So the whole scene looks pretty good to me. I really like it, but I think I can bring some more contrast between light and dark areas. So I'm gonna add a graduated filter right here. Sometimes you kind of have to move some of the filters you've added previously, and I'm gonna go pretty lot into the darks right here. Maybe make it a little bit bigger, then just right click duplicate, and maybe this whole area looks a little bit even, so I might add another one here just to kind of separate these light parts and to make the whole part right here a little bit more interesting. Like right click duplicate. I mean, this really is a thing that you can spend a lot of time with. You can also zoom in 1:1 and just add very small radial filters, but just for the sake of this video I want to keep it relatively short, so I'm just gonna do it rather quickly. I think this whole background right here could use a little bit, or actually a lot, of minus exposure, and I really like that look right here. Then let's grab another one just for this part of the rail and just kind of angle it to where it looks perfectly good. Duplicate, maybe another one just at the edge right here. Of course, adjust the exposure, and I think I am pretty much done. Actually, let me try and bring one over this portion of the sky, and it might even work. Let's go and bring the exposure down even more, just something like that. Duplicate this one again and just kind of go over there and add some more minus exposure over there. So actually I think this filter, particularly down here, was a little bit too much. Actually think I have to bring down the exposure. That's also a great thing with the radial filters compared to the adjustment brush. You really can't just go to a filter and change the exposure individually. So let's just add a few very small radial filters here with plus exposure, just to kind of make these very small portions a little bit more interesting, and bring up the exposure right here. Right click duplicate, maybe another one over here, and this train might use a little bit right there. And I think I am pretty much done with this picture. So let's see before any dodge and burning, and here is after. I really did it very quickly. I think this one is a little bit too much, by the way. But of course, if you take some time, you really can change your picture a lot and really get so much more complexity and so much more interest out of your lighting. Once again, here is before and here's after. So I think I am done with this picture. I really am happy with the way it ended up. Let's just go into the history, the very long history, and see where we started at. This is the start without any adjustments, and I mean, it's really a very boring, kind of not really interesting picture, but after editing it, we really created a very dramatic, very dark, and very unique black and white picture, and I really think it ended up looking pretty good. Here to the left is the before and to the right is after. Once again, keep in mind that if you find this to be a little bit too much, you can always adjust your adjustments and maybe not go as far as I have done. That's definitely up to you, but I really think that this one is the look that I like the best. So thank you very much for watching. If you would like to see more black and white edits, I have included a playlist with all of my black and white editing tutorials in Lightroom down in the description down below, or just click on the little exclamation mark in the top right corner of this video and you will get to the playlist as well. Also, if you've enjoyed this video, please be sure to subscribe. I make one photography related video every single day of the week, and if you've enjoyed this video and you've learned something from it, please take a second to give me a thumbs up. That is hugely appreciated and helps out the channel a lot. So I guess it's really time to close out the video. Once again, I want to thank you very much for watching. Keep taking awesome pictures. I want to wish you a great day, and of course, take care.